Hello everyone. Do you find that you're complaining a bit more now than maybe you used to? There's so much going on in the world to complain about, but maybe you're also feeling a bit ambivalent or a bit guilty about wanting to complain so much. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm John. I'm the founder of Evo Faith, a site where we explore evolutionary spirituality, and the Evo Faith Tribe, an online community where we support one another and talk together about how we can be conscious about evolving into our best selves and how we can contribute to a positive evolution in the world. There's no use in complaining. You've probably heard that said before. I used to believe this was true. And because I believed that, I didn't speak up when I should have. I allowed people to mistreat me until one day I just couldn't anymore, and it exploded out. I was tired, I was burned out, and I needed to express those frustrations. And when I finally did, everything changed. But there's a negativity in our society. And if you're involved in a faith community, there's often an even stronger negativity there around expressions of grief and complaint. Don't cry, we're told. There are limits on how long we can grieve for. And the challenge is that we always have to be nice. Never say anything negative. But there's a lot of brokenness that gets enabled because of that. I've discovered that complaining is a powerful spiritual practice. When we can let go of the illusion of always being kind, always being good, always being nice, when we can be honest about what we feel and what we're experiencing, what we're struggling with, and what we would want instead, that can be a very powerful thing to do, and it can be an important way to open us to spiritual growth. Now, I'm not talking about constantly being horrible or always being negative. I'm not talking about throwing kindness and compassion out the window. I'm saying that there's a liberation by facing the reality of our situation and processing properly the emotions that come with that, the negativity, the grief. And in the Bible, there's a practice for this. It's called Lament. And the first part of lamenting is complaining. Traditionally in Scripture, people would bring their complaint to God. The psalmists and the prophets in the Old Testament do it all the time. They believed in lament. They practiced it often, and they believed that God, as they understood God, heard them. I guess I could illustrate that a little bit with the story of a Jewish grandmother who took her grandson to the beach. And the child was playing near the shallow waters and building sandcastles, and suddenly out of the blue came this freak wave and swept over the boy and dragged him out to sea. And the grandmother jumped to her feet and looked for her child and couldn't see her grandson anywhere. And so she looked up to the heavens and she started shaking her fist at God. And she said, "How could you do this? I've been faithful to you. I've followed the laws. I've been in synagogue every week. I have been your faithful servant. And now you take my grandson away. How can you do this?" And she goes on like this for about 5-10 minutes, just shouting at the heavens. And suddenly another freak wave comes and washes over the sand near her feet. And as the wave pulls back, there her grandson is sitting on the sand. And she looks down at her grandson. And then she looks up at the heavens and she says, "He was wearing a hat." That's the power of the lament, of complaining creatively. I think there are tremendous benefits when we learn to complain well. Obviously, there's the goodness of expressing and processing the feelings that we're experiencing. And that leads us to be open to healing, to those feelings being transformed, being well processed, closing the loop on those feelings so that we can move beyond them. But there's another benefit that is closely linked with that. It's that when we express our emotions, when we complain, there's an internal cohesion that happens. The thing of always trying to be nice leads to a kind of cognitive dissonance where we're portraying one thing outwardly, but we're very different inwardly. And that can wear us down. It can contribute to things like depression and burnout. And so when we actually take our feelings seriously and we process them and we work with them, there's a cohesion that helps us to be healthier. Even if we're not okay, at least there's an integrity in our not okayness. But alongside that, when we can begin to name what we're struggling with, when we can begin to complain properly, honestly, we strengthen our resistance to that which is unacceptable for us. You may have heard it going around on the internet, the saying where people are saying, I used to accept what I cannot change, but now I'm changing what I cannot accept. That's what happens when we complain creatively, is we stop accepting what we shouldn't. And our resistance to injustice, to abuse, to what is no longer acceptable gets stronger. And then because of that, we find a new creative energy, a new capacity to change what is unacceptable, to do something different, to try different solutions or different patterns, different behaviors. Or we change our relationships. We change what we do, how we do, and who we do it with. And that means that we can enter into the creative chaos where we move out of what we know, the patterns that have become so familiar, and open ourselves to new possibilities, to new solutions. Creative complaining offers us all of these benefits. And so how do we do it? How do we grieve and complain positively, creatively? Well, I think the first thing I would say is we've got to be specific about our complaint. Name it. Name what is unacceptable. And if there is somebody against whom that complaint is focused, we would need to go to that person if we can and be specific about what it is that we're troubled about. Of course, in the tradition of lament, our complaint is addressed to the divine or to the universe. And that can be helpful too, kind of shouting to the heavens just to express that complaint. But again, being as specific as possible about what it is that we're wrestling with. And it's important as we do that we find safe spaces, places where we can express the full and honest force of our emotions. And you may not want to be doing that with a person that you're struggling with. You may need to do that alone or with a trusted advisor, with a therapist, or find a place out in the middle of nowhere where you can express your feelings. I remember when I was at university in a small town in South Africa called Grahamstown, there was a mountain just outside of the town and a rock that a friend of mine had used for prayer, and he'd shown me this rock. It was beautiful. It had a lovely view. It was far away from everyone else. You couldn't be seen from the road at the top of the hill. And so I could stand on that rock and I could just shout at the heavens. I could just let out the full force of my emotion. It was a tremendously healing place. Maybe you could use something like that. And then as part of that, you don't want to get stuck in a loop of just complaining all the time. That becomes destructive. But as part of your complaint, you can then move into the next process of the lament practice. And we'll talk about that next week. But as your complaining comes to a completion where you feel like you've said what you need to say, then you are open to take the next step. Remembering, asking for help, finding celebration and reasons for positivity. We'll look at those in the future. But of course, all of this means that hopefully you'll get to a place where your complaint leads you to some kind of action. It may be the action of letting go, of realizing that your complaint is not taking you anywhere and that you can't solve the problem, so you're going to have to learn to live with it and you let it go. Or it could be helping you to discover there's something you can change in the way you respond, or in things that you say, things that you do. Whatever it may be, your complaint can lead you to positive action. I believe that complaining, as part of a lament, can be a profound healing practice. And it's creative complaining that can get us unstuck when we're in those places of frustration and depression and feeling like our challenges are winning. Complaint helps us to identify what is no longer acceptable and chart a course through it to hopefully a life that fits us better. What experience have you had with creative complaining? How can you embrace creative complaining as a spiritual practice in your own life? What benefits have you found when you have used complaining in a positive way? Feel free to share some comments and your experiences so that we can journey together through this. And if you know of somebody who needs to hear that they are able and free and need to complain creatively, why don't you share this video? And of course, if you like what's coming out of Evo Faith, feel free to click the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of our future videos. Thanks for listening. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you'll go into this week and complain well, complain creatively, and find the healing that it gives you.